I'm talking today with Associate Professor Andrew McGregor from Macquarie University, and he's the lead researcher on Activity 5. So Andrew, could you start by just giving us a brief overview of what is Activity 5?
Sure. Activity 5 is learning from local agricultural success, and as the title suggests, the whole aim of this section is really to identify successful farmers from the case study area in Cambodia and try and understand what has enabled them to become successful. So what is the grounded experience of these people, who's managed to be adaptable, who's managed to negotiate the incredible pressures that they're facing to get ahead or to feel like their lives are successful in some way or other. So we want to learn from them about what success means to them, and also how do they practice success, how do they achieve success, and what does enable them to become successful.
And so what phase is the activity at the moment?
So we're in the design phase at the moment, and that has two major components. The first component is how do we identify the farmers that we consider to be successful? And that's a complex question because success has many different elements. For some it's about financial success, for others it might be about security, for some others it might be about access to land. There's many different ways that we can think about success. For others it could just be happiness, feeling satisfied that they've got a good life. We're trying to learn from farmers what success looks like, and the process for which we're going to sort of identify the successful households draws from the previous activities. So activity 1 looks at international experts and how a component of that is understand how international experts who practice agricultural extension understand success themselves. And there's a strong focus coming through some of the interviews that productivity is a really key component of success. So that's one way of thinking about success. We've also done a household census in activity 2, in which we're developing typologies of different types of households. There might be households who have members who are overseas, for example, and sending back remittances. And we might look at a sample of those types of households that we would consider more successful than some of the other households that are sending back remittances, and try and understand why are some of those more successful than others. Similarly, there might be other typologies that we're interested in from the Activity 2 data. Activity 3 then, which hasn't taken place yet, is also going to develop typologies of farms. And some farms are likely to be considered more successful than others as well. And again, that might come down to the outputs from the farm, or it might come to the more elements around sustainability, practices that are likely to be able to continue into the future. So success has many different dimensions, and so the sampling process that we're developing at the moment will heavily rely on that data that comes out of activities 1, 2, and 3. The second component then is once we've identified the 50 or so households that will be the focus of Activity 5, how then do we approach them and learn from them about what they've done to become successful in some way or other. How we're thinking about that at the moment is to divide into two components. One of the components is the social side of things. So what are the social dimensions of success? And to investigate the social dimensions of success, we're going to have household interviews. So we're going to go to the households, we're going to talk to different members of the households about how they contribute to the household. And we're going to do things like oral histories. So we look at particular moments in the history of the household that might have been transformative in some way. So it might have been, when someone went overseas and started sending back remittances, it might have changed the household dynamic. There might have been an opportunity to acquire more land, for example, or they might have shifted from a particular crop to fruit trees, and that has brought in more income for them, more opportunities for them going forward. So we want to understand those key moments in the past that are leading to success today. So we're not just looking at successes in this moment, but the histories that have led to success in some way or other. The other component that we're doing with Dr. Nick Harrigan, who's part of the team now, is social network analysis. So we're looking at what enables the farm, what sort of networks. It could be networks to the neighbours, could be networks to people who've gone overseas to work, could be networks to the village chief, could be networks to agricultural extensionists that successful households have that are contributing to their success in some way. And what are the relations that they're trying to avoid, which might be disabling them and maybe preventing them from getting ahead, or might be preventing others from getting ahead as well. So by understanding those social relations, we can think about ways of intervening in future activities to sort of improve relations in other households. The second component of the methods is to think about the material components of success. So not just the social, but we also believe that because we're talking about farms, the material settings are really important. And ways of thinking about material settings is to do methodologies like field walks, where we do a walk-in interview with the farmer. Because when you're doing interviews, we forget things. You're interviewing me right now, I'm forgetting things as I'm talking. But if we went and walked through the house, I could tell you about things in the house. In the same way, if we were walking across the farmer can tell us things that are triggered from looking at their crops or looking at the equipment and talking about what sort of components in the material world are really important to their success or otherwise. And the final component of the material analysis will be to adopt a methodology called photo response. One of my former PhD students developed, and I've been working with him on photo response, which is where you say to the farmers, here's a camera or here's a phone, can you take photos on a regular basis? It might be daily or weekly or something like that, depending on how long the period goes for. And again, this enables them to identify elements on their farm that are contributing to their success in some way or other that may, again, not come up in interviews where we have time pressures and may not come up in the field walk. So they might take a photo of a neighbour and say, this person's really helped me today. Or they might take a photo of the government extension officer and say, this has been fantastic. Or they might take a photo of some money that they've received from their family through remittances and say, well, this is what's enabling us to get ahead. So it's these different creative methodologies that we're experimenting with and designing at the moment, which I think are going to be really revealing when we put them in practice.
Yeah, really interesting. And what have you learned from the project over the last 12 months, which is influencing that design?
So the most important thing for me over the past 12 months was a field trip to Battambong and Paulin. That was really insightful for me. We met a whole bunch of partners that we're working with, getting to understand their capacities, and just developing those relationships is so important in the first instance, like really, really important. What I was really impressed with was all the partners we're working with have huge experience and expertise in this area, and it's so valuable for someone like me who's fairly new to the Cambodian context. But also meeting the research assistants. We've got a fantastic team working over there, and for this project to be successful, we're really relying on those research assistants. We ran a workshop there, and one of the really good examples in the workshop with the research assistants was when we were talking about success, they were providing us examples of success. And one of the case studies that one of the research assistants chose was actually a very, what we'd consider an economically poor farmer who didn't have many assets or resources, but had moved from a landless farmer into a farmer who had access to a small amount of land. And so that's the sort of person who would not be picked up as, we're not just interested in wealthy farmers in a sort of, it wouldn't be picked up in some analyses, but because they've moved from one state to another, that's a form of success that we want to include in this sort of analysis. So poor farmers who have managed to get ahead in some way or other, how did he get that land? How did he get that access? What enabled him to do that? You know, what was the contribution of other household members for him to get in that position? So one of the things that we're relying on is the research assistants themselves, their experiences of doing activity 2 and activity 3 going forward. What are their impressions of success and who do they think have been successful? So we'll be relying on them a lot in this process. The other things we've been doing over the last 12 months has been, I've hired a couple of research assistants in Australia, and they've done some background briefing papers on social network analysis and how it's been used in rural settings. So that's been really interesting, and there's a whole bunch of papers that need to be read, and that's going to inform our analysis, our approach in that area. I also had a research assistant do some research on more than human research methods, and that's the photo response type approach that we talked about before. So again, we're going to be really innovative in that space, so we'll be using sort of cutting edge methods in that area. The only other thing which has been really valuable is just the regular team meetings that we're having. So we have regular meetings every fortnight, and it's just a huge wealth of information coming together through those meetings, and as well as in-person meetings. We've had them at Macquarie University, we've had them in Cambodia, and we've also had around Melbourne. Wonderful meetings that have really improve the context, understanding of context, and understanding of the industry as well.
Yeah, great. And so what's planned for the next 12 months for Activity 5?
Activity 5 will be implemented in the next 12 months, which is fantastic. Very excited about that. The exact timing is still to be decided, but I'm expecting early 2024 at this stage. So that will involve finalising the sampling strategy, finalising the methods, travelling out to Cambodia to help train the research assistants, seeing how it goes, because we'll have to do a bit of a trial run, seeing how the first few interviews go and how some of the more creative methods around photo response and things like that go, and then rolling it out to the 50 households going forward. So, I expect in the next 12 months that we'll implement Activity 5 and if not have it all completed, at least most of it complete within the 12 months. So it's really exciting, really looking forward to the next 12 months and seeing how that goes.
And what are you hoping to find out?
I guess we're hoping to challenge the way in which agricultural extension has traditionally been done. And we're hoping to find out about all the different components of what makes a farm successful, all the social components or the more than human components that contribute to success on the farm in a way that I think a lot of experts know about because they've been practicing in this area for so many years, but haven't necessarily been the focus of their projects. So I think if we can just start with the experiences of farmers and really learn from them. So it means being quite humble, letting farmers tell us and inform us about what has enabled them to become successful. Then, there's so much that we can learn from the lived experiences of people who have been innovative, who've been adaptive, who've been able to negotiate all these changing pressures that they're under. There's so much wealth of material there, and to bring that into light, I think is really powerful and can inform us in academia, can inform people who are doing agricultural extension. And it's that stuff which is just on the side. Like, I think everyone knows that that's really invaluable, but we haven't really centred it as well as we could have in the past. So I think that, has all sorts of potential to improve and think about how we do some of these projects better in the future. And ultimately, of course, this is all about trying to help and provide different ways of enabling or assisting people who, not the successful farmers, but there's farmers who have been less successful, how they can sort of get ahead and balance the multiple pressures that they're under. Yeah.
Really interesting. Thank you so much for your time today, Andrew.
Okay. Thank you, Caitlin.